Intangible, speaking for the unspoken. Born in Michigan, July 24, 1969, she looked to the stars as a child and discovered more than comfort in the silence. Abuse creates the recluse, and her environment made her run. September 23, 2022, it stopped her in her tracks. She had collected enough puzzle pieces, and her time to make the intangible tangible was now upon her. They only make statues of crazy people. I'll take that challenge. Just as there are readers and writers, there are the religious and the spiritual. What some may call God, consciousness, universe, or true self, I call it life. From divine predictions to bilocation and everything in between, life leaves clues to guide us on our journey. I recall choosing this lifetime, knew it would be difficult, but knew it would be worth it. Within is the best place to be. Here is my story. Black and white. For as long as I can remember, I've always said, I don't care what anyone else does or doesn't do, as long as it doesn't negatively affect me. If it does, I'm going to have to say something about it. When others start gossiping to me about things, I take note, but I do not feed into their machine. Gossip is not my thing, and HR had advised me that makes me unfriendly or unapproachable, which wasn't the case either. However, I'm at work to help the business, not deal with the pettiness of others. I'm an analyst. Always have been. Does it bother you nobody on your team likes you? Someone once asked me. No, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to help the business grow. I also knew it wasn't true, but I was aware of who did have issues with me and why. Dealing with numbers and software is my area of expertise, not people. HR and managers deal with people, and I have no desire to do their job. That's the job of an analyst. Identify, catch, and correct things that are detrimental to the success of the business. If they're not doing their job and it's negatively affecting my ability to successfully perform my job, them not liking me has to do with their own unwillingness to learn their job. I can teach them how to provide the data being requested, but they don't want me to. They prefer being ignorant, and I can't change that in them. Analysts accept others might not like them and understand it's often due to the individual's own shortcomings, even though the individual cannot see it. We do our best to not let it affect us and simply move forward. It's also not our job to explain to those unfamiliar with an analyst what our job is. The right people know, or we wouldn't be there. Receiving praise, being asked for my input, receiving the bonuses and letters that go along with it, then sent to help with her new startup. That was enough for me to know I was doing well by the owner. Suffice it to say, our job is not in black and white. It's an understanding of the whole. At the time, I worked for Andra, a wonderful minority woman who owned 51% of the company. This was the second company of hers I'd worked for. My presence was requested here a few years prior due to being recognized for my ability to help her other business grow and my willingness to follow where she needed me, even if that meant moving. I admired her most because of what she stood for. I was advised her own personal goal was to help as many people as possible achieve their dreams. Thousands, if not more, in her community, broadly used. That's when she would be successful. If that meant paying for someone on the assembly line to get their nursing degree, she paid for it. If they wanted to learn to weave hair, she paid for it. Whatever they wanted to do to better themselves, she supported them in their journey. That is the kind of people I admire and am proud to help reach their goals. That was my purpose. August 2018, completely out of nowhere, she advised she sold the company. Even those closest to her were surprised they were not in the know. My heart felt hers and my eyes welled as my chest began to flutter. She graciously transferred us over into the hands of the new owner, who seemed nice enough, but I knew, inside, they had finally succeeded in their battle to push a successful woman out of their industry. She was paid well, was the excuse I heard, a puffed-up justification for their behavior. But it's not about the money for some of us. We formally met the new owner at dinner, and his charisma was noted. Hoping he understood what Andra stood for, I told him that night I was a big supporter of her and hoped to be a supporter of him as well. I also felt this man was not the one who handled his business, but left it to those capable of handling such negotiations. I stayed on the side of her dreams, hoping to see more from him. The CFO retired that night as well, which was probably best for the company, and I found it odd he was receiving such grand recognition based on my own experiences with him, but I wished him luck nonetheless. Back in the office, the air was thick with tension. The execs knew new ownership generally meant new execs would replace them and their own days were likely limited. They also reminded me some owners buy companies to liquidate them. We had built a thriving, successful business with many accolades from the customer, and I didn't want to believe the new owner was in that type of business and pushed it to the back of my mind. It was a long time no secret throughout the company how HR was, with stories of interactions regularly bringing the word racist into the mix. That's not the world I live in, I told them, refusing to participate in their rants and venting, and blocked out such things from my own inner world. I have issues with individuals for specific reasons, but not any group of people as a whole. That's not logical. But people talk to me because I either helped them directly understand things to be successful in their role, those who should have lacked the hands-on experience to do so, or they felt safe talking to me. I had mentors I felt the same way about, although I didn't consider myself as a mentor. I preferred laying low and doing my job, nose to the grindstone. My own chosen ignorance, if you will, as I see people from the inside out, not the other way around. I was aware they were strong women, but HR sometimes needs strong people. That's not an easy job. After coming back from shoulder surgery, with HR specifically telling me I was not allowed to look at my computer while I was out, the tension in the air was different. Much of the prior tension had been removed, and what filled the space was not something anyone remaining felt comfortable with. It felt more like walking through gel. It made you not want to move and difficult to breathe in. Nobody said a word. It was quite a different feel than any I'd experienced before, with new people approaching me asking what I did there. Words like spy were curiously now in place, and it made me wonder what they were up to. But again, I'd let it go. I did quickly deduce they were listening to conversations, which further supported the unusual quiet. Some tried denying it, but when things come back to you that are out of place, you test the system. And I did. Was it life or was it Memorex? In addition to the execs and all that had fallen before, at the end of September 2019, I was told the event that happened that day was coined by HR as the bloodletting. Dozens more people were surprisingly let go that day, raising tensions even further. The following day, they announced they had completed their mission, as if to help ease the grip they had around the throats of those remaining around me. We were encouraged to decorate our office cubes to show our own personality, which I saw as a feeble attempt to create some semblance of normalcy. In my bubbly fashion, to break the tension, I did just that. Whenever I saw a favorite and familiar face I hadn't seen since returning from my own surgery, I'd wave at them from across the room and open my overhead cabinet to show them I'd created a childlike pop-up on the bin door, complete with scarecrows, straw bales, and pumpkins for the fall season. I was quite pleased with myself about it, shining my smile or silently laughing with them. "Terry's back," they'd say. That always made me smile, as it let me know they missed me. Even though things there were quite different, it made me feel appreciated, and in that way, I was glad to be back. I soon discovered HR was not as pleased, to say the least, nor were the new execs. There was a meeting notice sent out, and it seemed everyone in the office asked if I received it and if I was attending. I told them I had not received the email, but they knew that was not anything new to me, since most of the meetings I'd previously been invited to were not organized to provide any benefit to my position, and suggestions for improvement were ignored. After a supervisor forced me to do a task that was being demanded of them, in addition to the sales analyst, account manager, service manager, and business analyst positions I already held, I decided it was time to speak openly with a mentor about it. Generally, after 5 p.m. is when we would often put the work part aside and vent frustrations to start the next day with a fresher perspective. Quite surprisingly that day, being one who regularly stayed late, I noticed everyone in the office, except him, had promptly and quietly left at 5 p.m. Even the regular late people weren't there. Sitting across the desk from him in his office, about 10 minutes later, we heard someone walking, so I peeked out of the open doorway to see who it was. The HR director was walking in our direction, but stopped when she saw me looking out the doorway at her. I told him who it was and sat back down to finish our conversation. I did note that he stopped being curious in what I was showing him, and allowed him that. The next morning, as people filed by on their way upstairs to the windowless conference room for that 9 a.m. meeting, my nose was to the grindstone with yet another email to the new VP of Sales, Purchasing and Strategy, when surprisingly, he and the second in charge of HR approached me and asked me to join them. Perfect, I can talk to them directly, right now, while no one is around. When I stood up, I noticed the entire office was not only vacant, but felt odd. This place is so different, I thought to myself. I pushed that aside and proceeded without hesitation to the HR director's office with them. I told them it was perfect timing and proceeded to advise of what I was writing to the VP about. They seemed to agree that was the purpose of the meeting as well. Good, we're all on the same page. She needs help, I advised. That's when the second in charge physically lunged at me with her whole body, her finger just inches from my face. I sat stoically as she yelled, "Is that what you're going with?" Quizzically, I looked at her, and in my head, I heard my venting from the night before. She's been in this position for 10 months and still doesn't have a clue what her job is. She's stuck in a purchasing mindset trying to manage sales and is clearly frustrated because of it. She can't even identify the main product we sell to the customer on the report. Here's the recording of her meeting with me. Ah, so her lunging at me is about her new friend. I looked beyond her to the HR director as if to say, "Are you seeing this?" The VP acknowledged what I said and advised them I had, in fact, been trying to meet with him on the matter, but he knew he had conveniently ignored my request, as did I, which is why I was putting it in writing. Their mind was made up long before I returned from surgery. That's why they didn't want me looking at my computer. Even the convenient meeting upstairs was to cover up what was going on now. The HR director replied, "If you know so much, you should have seen this coming." I shook my head as I looked into her eyes. Yep, she's perfect for this job, but it's not the job of anyone in HR. It's just a title she has. I'm done with these people. They clearly don't understand business or why I'm here, nor do they care. I simply said, "Give me the paper," and reached my hand out for it. The HR director opened her center top desk drawer, pulled out the upside-down paper, and handed it to me as her second in charge sat her ass back down in her chair in front of me. There was no reason for the dismissal on the paper. That part was accurate. In our state, you can fire someone for any reason or no reason, but not for a wrong reason. At least they knew this much, I said to myself. "What's the reason?" I asked. The second in charge huffingly said, "Pick one." I just looked at her, not understanding what she meant. She stood back up, almost over me, and filled in the sentence with integrity. I looked straight at her, shook my head, and chuckled, a bit to myself and a bit out loud, recalling somebody who had visited my desk in the prior weeks asking what I held to the highest regard about myself and in my job, and presented me with a list of options from their new core value system. I knew what she said was her feeble attempt to align my role with their highly twisted core values, left quite open to one's own interpretation and left unanswered when I'd previously inquired. The new VP probably was also aware, and I noted this as he sat quietly next to me, watching it unfold. He's just here to witness. He's already said he doesn't know anything. The VP and second in charge of HR then suggested we go to my desk to clean out what was mine. They asked about the decorations, and I stated I did not want them. Then watched as both of them promptly started trying to rip them off the overhead bin. I laughed out loud because the black duct tape was making it difficult for them, and it was quite amusing to see two adults behaving in tandem in such a fervent manner. Much to my delight, the dollar store decorations firmly held their ground. I was waiting to see if the overhead bin would be pulled off the wall. Wouldn't that be the icing on the cake, I mused to myself. Denise walked by about that time, knowing. I waved to her. I was fully expecting to be escorted to my vehicle as I saw how they'd helped one of the directors leave, but that was not the case. In fact, they let me leave on my own with a single small box of my highlighters, pens, and notepads. As I approached my car, I laughed to myself, they could have at least opened my door for me. In the following months, I learned dozens more were let go, including their friend they were trying so hard to protect versus help. They also lost the coveted status with their main customer. I was advised only one person was left in that department to fill in the blank on their new org chart, most likely. After all, what good is a VP with nobody to preside over? Maybe it really was a liquidation and a real attempt to squash the thriving, successful business and woman we all loved, as I had felt it was. Or maybe the hands the new owner left the company in were not so capable after all. Regardless, it was no longer my problem to solve. DNA. Early on in life, 10 to 12 years old, I recognized different groups of people handled the loss of a loved one differently. In my environment, there was only grief, but in my heart, I felt the release and wondered why. I soon learned other cultures treated death in various ways, most notably using death as an opportunity to celebrate someone's life. To me, this felt like a much better way of handling that part of the natural cycle. However, it made me question why we wait until someone is dead to celebrate them. What good does it do to the individual who died? It feels more like a missed opportunity. I started looking at each person from this perspective, looking past the bad to find the good they were trying to put out and recognize them for that. However, I was not successful in doing so with everyone and accepted there was a reason we strive for the good. Growing up, I was brought along to different churches for various reasons, but none of them resonated with me. Mom insisted I be baptized, though. As my ears tuned into the sermon, I heard, "And he will raise the people from the dead." So dramatic, I thought. Is that even possible? My young scientific mind deduced it was not. It didn't even make sense. Why do people push this line of thinking? What else do they push? Do people really believe we will be raised from the dead, from 6 feet underground, inside a cement box, inside a wood box? I asked. Yes, they do, he replied. How do they make any sense of such nonsense? I inquired. They just believe, because the Bible says so, he replied. Okay, fair enough. I have no desire to read such things or have that pushed upon me. That's completely illogical. What will happen when you die? He continued. I want a mausoleum, I exclaimed. A mausoleum? That's impressive. Why a mausoleum? He asked. I have to save this DNA, I resounded as I danced around laughing. Finding the bone early on in life started my interest in archaeology, which led me to dinosaurs and, of course, the pyramids and tombs. I said there should be a way to x-ray the ground, like we x-ray bones in people, so we can find them easier. He laughed. Maybe one day there will be. And I started imagining how that would look. Decades later, we are now equipped with things like GPS, global positioning systems, GPR, ground penetrating radar, and LIDAR, light detection and ranging. My dream came true. Why didn't I pursue archaeology? I also decided the mausoleum would only be for myself, my spouse, if any, my kids, their kids, etc., our line, but only if I approve of them. If my kids turned out to be rotten, they would not be allowed. It was a firm rule. I already had no problem cutting people out of my life that do not deserve to be there. I don't care who you are. But why? Why would I think my DNA was so special? Maybe I just wanted to be remembered, and one day examined like mummies of so long ago. Later I learned how bodies would explode if not properly preserved. But preserving by formaldehyde wouldn't work for me because saving my DNA was the whole purpose. Looking back, I put some thought into this. What a strange kid I was. In 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic came around, I knew I was not getting vaccinated, nor did I believe it was a vaccine, but possibly had a more nefarious intention, or the virus wouldn't have been created in the first place. Over the next couple of years, I took note of how they changed the vaccine symptoms each time the virus morphed, and each time the symptoms were downgraded from being like a severe upper respiratory infection to that of a normal flu, then a cold, and I never heard anyone say they went to the doctor and were told they had the flu or an upper respiratory infection. Every broad symptom was labeled as possibly COVID. Convenient for the pharmaceutical companies? Scare tactics to encourage compliance with the narrative to make more and more money? I firmly believe so. I generally stay away from politics and such things, but my strong knowing feeling about this is pertinent to my DNA. Life forewarned me of changes made to the pill used for pregnancy prevention also, and after hearing several co-workers discussing how their daughters couldn't get pregnant after taking the pill, I promptly advised my kids to not take it unless or until they were ready to stop having kids of their own. Unfortunately, my daughter had started it soon after she had her son and wasn't able to get pregnant again after that. Similar situations as from work. That was something else I also felt had seemed to change over the years, from a good intention for the people to something much different. I have plenty of reasons to have my guard up, but it is not in me to partake in such things. I fought my dragons while trying to live my own life and somehow survived. But when companies create things that clearly states a change to my DNA, I take note. Life told me to protect it, and I do just that. My body is healthy, and the symptoms of the infection sound more like a bad upper respiratory infection. Can such things kill some people? Absolutely, especially if created. In December 2019, while obtaining my life insurance license, the entire company was hit with such thing, and my experience with that virus was 3 weeks of abnormal difficulty breathing and upper respiratory infection, followed by a couple more weeks of recovery. However, we also didn't have the fear being pushed that we could die from it until several weeks later. What we believe, we will achieve. This is the dark side of where fear-mongering comes into play with people's beliefs. Whatever this thing was, I could handle it, but I was also not concerned. Something told me I'd probably already had it. After all, nature has never inflicted anything on me like man has. In contrast, nature has only helped me survive all that man has thrown at me, and why I turn to it for my own answers as often as possible. I don't know why I've made it through all that I have, to be quite honest, or how long I have left, but life has a reason for me being here. Maybe something in my story is it. DNA, do not adjust.